Alright, what's up everybody? So today's video is going to be a pretty interesting one. My goal here is basically to teach all the Phantom Knight players the highest forms of interactions and all the rulings that you need to know to successfully play this deck at a higher competitive level, making sure that you win every game you're supposed to win and not lose because you don't know an interaction. We're going to go ahead and start off with Cherubini, our main starter. And so, as many of you know, Cherubini does dump for cost, so obviously it cannot be ashed, which is the most minor thing here. But let's say Cherubini, you go off and you start going first and you make Cherubini, you dump Graph if you're playing the BA package. I know I'm not, but let's say you do. You dump Graph and they chain Ghost Ogre. If you allow that Ghost Ogre to resolve and destroy your Cherubini, you're going to be in quite a predicament. So, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and stop that Ghost Ogre from destroying our Cherubini. So, this is how you protect Cherubini even if there's no cards on the field. You do require a quick play spell in hand that is legal to be activated. So, in this case, we're going to go ahead and Chainlink 2, activate the emergency teleport. And if there's no responses at resolution, we'll summon our Psychic Wielder. And then on the resolution, when Ogre attempts to destroy Cherubini, we're not going to send that Wielder. We're actually going to send the E-Telly that is on the field still and use it to protect. This is because Cherubini has an effect that whenever it would be marked for destruction, you can protect it by sending any other card on the field as a protection cost. So, in this scenario, the E-Telly is going to go ahead and basically serve the purpose of protecting Cherubini and summoning the monster, which is really, really good. Now, the other thing I want to talk about in reference to Cherubini is when you're dealing with multiple or mass destruction cards such as Salamangreat Rage, there's a few things you need to understand. So the first is, if both Cherubini and the monster are being marked for destruction, the monster that it's pointing to will survive because Cherubini's effect protects it at the time of destruction, and then Cherubini will go to graveyard. If you allow that, there is one thing you can do that it does not imply that happening, which is because that monster is not marked for destruction, you are able to actually go ahead and use that as the protection cost to keep Cherubini alive. So this does come up sometimes, very unlikely, but it can come up against like Salamangreat, which happened the other day at the Orlando Locals that I played at, and they used Rage, tried to destroy multiple cards. I had a monster there and I protected the Cherubini, which allowed me to go ahead and advance and further my plays. So make sure you guys keep that one in mind. Alright, the next thing we're going to do is go over how we can actually prevent negation in our deck, and luckily there's a few ways we can go about doing so. Now we're going to use the Adventure Griffin as basically our main example here, as this is kind of the card we want to keep alive. So since we play a token, unfortunately, evenly matched kind of just wrecks us, so we're going to try to prevent getting evenly matched at all costs. Now, obviously you have to assess your own game states in the individual matches you play, but I do believe that 9 times out of 10, these interactions are going to be the right play. So, the first thing we're going to talk about is singular effect negation, which would be like imperm or freezing curses, etc. So there's a few ways of preventing that, and by preventing it, I don't necessarily mean that we stop it from resolving. Sometimes it actually resolves, but then we still manage to resolve our own Griffin. So I'm going to show you how that works. So, first and foremost, let's say they imperm our Griffin. The simplest thing that we can do here is with the interaction of having a book, either of Eclipse or Moon, whichever or. So we allow that to go through, and a simple ruling in Yu-Gi-Oh! That a lot of competitive players know is that face-down monsters forget all of the lingering conditions that were applied to them. Therefore, if they were negated, it does not matter. Once flip face down, they'll forget, which means we'll allow them to imperm, whatever, cool, that's fine. Then they'll go battle phase and activate evenly match. Obviously, they can do anything else. It doesn't have to be evenly matched, but let's say they do evenly match. Well, then we can go Griffin Chainlink 2, and if there's no response, we'll then go ahead and Chainlink 3, the Book of Eclipse. This will set the Griffin. The Griffin will forget that it was negated, and this is ruled the same as Time Thief. Because it says discard, the Griffin is still able to shuffle itself back, even in face-down defense position. Therefore, the effect will resolve. Now, let's go on to a few little bit more complicated scenarios. So, this is unique to our deck, which is basically using Fogblade to protect the Griffin. So the thing is, in Yu-Gi-Oh! You can only negate a monster once. You cannot apply another negation onto a monster. Therefore, if they go activate infinite impermanence and target our Griffin, we are able to go ahead and chain the Fogblade targeting the Griffin. If we do that, what will happen is that on the resolution, Fogblade will resolve first, it will negate the Griffin, and then Imperm will attempt to negate the Griffin, but it's already negated, so it won't do anything. Now this is important because we have a few ways of now removing the Fogblade from the Griffin, which will then go ahead and allow the Griffin to go through. So the simplest way in Engine is to then go Chainlink 3, so it's Chainlink 1 Imperm, Chainlink 2 Fogblade, Chainlink 3 Wings and Graveyard, which is one of the things I always set up. I see a lot of players not setting this up, but I always make sure I have a Wings and a Braceword and Graveyard. That is essentially part of my main combos, which I'll display in another video. So now that we go Chainlink 3 Wings, if assuming they didn't have any response, and if they don't have any response after that, in the next chain, we'll go ahead and trigger the effect of Ardiche and target our Fogblade, which will destroy the Fogblade, and then now the Griffin will be live. So the unique thing about this specific interaction is that it happens immediately, so in the next chain. So if they don't chain something to the Bardiche effect, what that'll mean is that now in the new open game state, we're able to negate the first thing that happens. There's the reason why we're doing it like this, that where we're chaining the Wings to the Fogblade instead of just waiting later on to do it, is because we don't want them to then go ahead and just activate any crazy spell or trap or monster effect that we're not going to be able to negate with Griffin, because then if we Wings, we have to wait until the following chain for the Bardiche to even trigger. So that's why we're going to go ahead and do it as Chainlink 3. Now, there is one other way of doing this with our Forbidden Droplets. And with Droplets, it's kind of insane actually, because Droplets even allows us to play around Dark Ruler effectively. So what will happen is, same thing, either Imperm or Dark Ruler will be activated on our Griffin, we'll chain Fogblade, and then we'll leave it at that for now. We'll allow our opponent to play. For example, let's say they go Normal Summon Eluver, Effective Eluver, Resolve Eluver, add Branded Fusion, and then they try to go Branded Fusion. Well then, we'll go ahead and go Chainlink 2 Griffin, followed by, if they have no response, Chainlink 3 Droplet, sending that Fogblade for cost. The Fogblade will no longer negate the Griffin, and the Griffin will resolve with effect. One interesting thing that I want to discuss is that Dark Ruler specifically will actually be able to go ahead and play around that as well, because let's say they Dark Ruler the board. Well, we wait for them to get 2 monsters, which actually came up in my Inferno match at the regional. So we let them get 2 monsters on the board, and then once they get the 2 monsters on the board, we then go, well, we wait for them to use a card we want to negate, and then we go Chainlink 3 Droplet, or Chainlink 2 Droplets, Chainlink 2 Griffin, followed by Chainlink 3 Droplets, and then we send the Fogblade and the Bardiche. So at the regional, what happened was they did not realize this. I was able to resolve it, negate the effect that they use to like equip something from deck or something. I don't even know what it was going to do. Then they went into Assault without realizing I still had these 2 in Graveyard. So I was able to go Chainlink 1 Fogblade or Wings. It doesn't matter which one you do first, but you just have to target Braceword first, and then chain the other one and target the Bardiche, which will essentially make it so that Bardiche will be summoned, followed by the Braceword. And then Braceword will allow the Bardiche to trigger in the next chain and essentially pop the monster that they summoned, which in the regional happened to be an Assault, which really did well. So that's why the Droplets one is kind of the craziest one, because it kind of allows us to play around even mass negation like Dark Ruler. So in the last scenario, we discussed a few ways of actually stopping the negation or actually playing around it to then be able to still resolve our Griffin in that turn. So this next scenario I'm going to go ahead and talk about. I personally cannot do it as I don't run this Borolo Savage Dragon, nor do I run this Hoppier Squadron. However, there's a combo variant out there that I've seen that basically ends on this insane board where they search Hoppier off of Cupid Pitch, and then they end on like Apple, Boro, and a bunch of other stuff. So for those guys, I'm going to go ahead and show them basically how we go ahead and play around this. Now, I did forget to grab a Fogblade, so we're going to go ahead and put that here. So, pretty much same circumstance. Let's say you get Imperm or Dark Ruler or whatever, and we chain the Fogblade on the Boro Load Savage Dragon. Well, now we can just wait until they activate a monster effect. Sorry, not a monster effect. Wait until they activate any card or effect, chain the Boro Load Savage Dragon, And then Chainlink 3 will use the Hoppier Squadron. Now I don't have a Baron in my extra deck right now, so I'm just going to go ahead and explain that the Hoppier Squadron basically will allow it to summon itself and then synchro off this Borreload Savage Dragon, which will remove the Borreload from the field to summon that Baron, which essentially also removes this Fog Blade. And even if it didn't remove the Fog Blade does not matter because the monster is no longer on the field to be applicable by the Fog Blade. Therefore, this will go ahead and actually allow that effect to resolve even if the Boros Savage Dragon had previously been targeted by Imperm or they had used Dark Ruler, as long as we did Chainlink 2 Fog Blade on our own Boros Savage. Now, there's another way here, obviously with IP, if they didn't Dark Ruler, they just Impermed it, where we can link off the Boros Savage Dragon as Chainlink 3, so it would be Chainlink 2 Boro to whatever thing you want to negate, Chainlink 3 IP, and we go ahead and make a unicorn. And yes, I do run IP and unicorn, so I can do that in my deck, but the problem is I don't run any interruptions in the monster form that can actually resolve without leaving the field. Because Griffin, if you remove it off the field with either of these, it would die, and then you wouldn't be able to use the effect. Same thing with Legal Knight, same thing with Time Thief. So unfortunately, this is not applicable in my version of the deck, but for those of you playing combo variants with other stuff like this, keep in mind, you can do the same thing. You don't have to have a way of sending the Fog Blade if you have a way of sending the monster. So you'll be able to go Chainlink to the monster effect, and then use anything to remove the monster, and it will resolve as properly intended. Alright, so previously we talked about being able to use the Book of Eclipse or Book of Moon in order to make your monsters forget the lingering conditions such as being negated and therefore resolving when you go Chainlink 2 monster effect or Chainlink 1 monster effect, and then later on in the chain you go ahead and use a book card. Now, in this scenario, we're going to basically talk about what books make you forget, make the monster forget, and what they don't. So, in this scenario, we're saying we have a Braceword that was Exceed Summoned and a Torn Scales that was either summoned off Fog Blade or summoned off its own effect. Doesn't really matter. The purpose of this is that it's going to get banished when it leaves the field, theoretically. So, if we activate Book of Eclipse now, what do you guys think would happen? Let me answer that for you. So the Breaksword was Exceed Summon. This means face down monsters, they forget what effect specifically summoned them, as well as the specific materials, but they do remember what type of method was used to summon them. Therefore, they do remember that they were summoned off of an Exceed Summon or Synchro Summon, etc. So the Braceword will remember that is a successfully Exceed Summon card. Therefore, if we had gone Braceword Chainlink 1 and they imprinted it as Chainlink 2, and then we chained the book, the Braceword will resolve, flipping itself face down after the book, or the book would flip it face down, and then it will destroy itself along with whatever card we targeted, and in the new chain, because it had been properly Exceed Summoned, it will trigger to summon back 2 level 3s, or 2 Phantom Knights and make them level 4s. Now, the Torn Scales was summoned off an effect, not a summoning method. Therefore, when it's flipped face down, it will forget how it was summoned and it will go to graveyard. This actually came up in the Pearly match and the last round of the regional, where I faced Pearly and I had basically a Torn Scales and a Bardiche. I hadn't been able to resolve Bardiche, so I didn't really have much to do there. So the Torn Scale kind of lingered, and then they went Cosmic Cyclone on my book. I chained the book, flipped it face down, so that way it went to graveyard instead of being banished, which allowed me to have it for the next turn, which basically sealed the game for me. Now, there is one more ruling I want to discuss with Book specifically, either Eclipse or Moon, but really it's going to be Eclipse most of the time. And it's in reference to this trap card, Destructive Daruma Karma Cannon. So let's read the trap card really quickly. What it does is it says, change as many monsters on the field as possible to face down defense position, comma, then if either player controls a face-up monster, they must send all face-up monsters they control to the graveyard. So, when a card has then if it in its text, that means that the A effect and the B effect are conditional and sequential. So A happens before B, but A must happen for B to happen. If you chain Book of Eclipse and they have monsters on the field and you have monsters, then what will happen is every monster will be flipped before the Daruma Cannon resolves, and then Daruma Cannon will not be able to perform A because there's no monsters to flip face down. And then because it didn't perform A, they won't be able to perform B, meaning your token and your Cherubini in this scenario will remain on the field. Alright guys, so for this last example, I'm going to show you guys how you can use droplets to basically avoid getting drolled one time. So basically, to do this, you have to have a monster to discard. It doesn't matter send off droplets. It doesn't matter if you add it off the effect you're adding or if you just already had it in hand, but you do have to have a monster. So what you're going to go ahead and do is you're going to set up whatever you need to do to search, and then once you search, you're probably going to want to do this while you're in deck. You want to tell your opponent, hey, I'm going to use turn player priority on the resolution of this effect. This matters because Droll is not a trigger effect, it is a quick effect. Therefore, technically speaking, you are able to activate any effect you want to before they Droll you. So in this scenario, we're going to add our monster, and then we're going to go turn player priority, and we're going to activate that droplet. We're going to go ahead and send a monster, and this will make it so that they cannot chain Droll. What you want to do, if they have face downs and you can send a spell or trap card, that's probably really good as well, just because then they can't go chain link 2 the spell and trap and then chain link 3 Droll. But if they don't have any of that, you can just send a monster. It does not matter as long as the monster is involved in this, which will make it so that since Droll is a quick effect, they aren't able to go ahead and chain Droll to the droplet, meaning they won't be able to do it on that chain. The chain will resolve, and then they will not be able to drop it on the next chain. And so you have guaranteed yourself another search off of this interaction, which will make it so that you can get a secondary search. And to be honest, in this deck, getting 2 searches should be enough to get you to game. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope it taught you guys something. And I hope you guys can use this experience to go ahead and do a little bit better at your locals, regionals, whatever you guys are doing. And yeah, if you have any other ruling interactions that you want to comment down below, feel free to do so. Just know that I am going to be dropping another video on advanced plays. So this video specifically discussed things that had to do with rulings, but the next one will just be advanced plays in general. And I hope you guys stay tuned for that one and have a great day.